The Vulpine perched herself on a metallic bench, tail curling nervously, ears twitching like she might pick up the faintest whisper of human misunderstanding. She had landed on this human colony planet days ago, and every moment since had been a series of minor indignities and awkward encounters. Humans, so clever with their gadgets, so blind to feelings, buzzed past her in an unending stream of efficiency, their eyes glued to glowing screens or arms stacked with packages, oblivious to the silent, golden-furred observer at the edge of their carefully calibrated civilization. She sighed, a low, musical exhalation that sounded almost like a complaint and almost like a sigh of longing. Around her, humans jostled each other with gestures that seemed polite in theory but executed with a gracelessness that made her feel simultaneously amused and insulted. One carried a coffee cup, spilling a droplet on her foot. Another laughed so loudly at nothing in particular that her ears flattened against her head in mild terror. They were so technically advanced, yet emotionally blind. She wondered if any of them even knew the meaning of a delicate touch or a considered glance. She had been handled before, but never like this, not ignored and overstimulated at the same time. Her eyes swept across the park, a carefully engineered human, green space, filled with artificial plants and robotic maintenance drones. The trees were small, weak imitations of the giants that once covered her homeworld, and the ferns had been shrunk for aesthetic effect, their leaves shiny with synthetic dew. Yet she studied them as if seeking clues to human behavior, noting how the creatures moved and interacted, misinterpreting every gesture. One human crouched awkwardly to tie a shoe, and she mused. Even their lower appendages seemed clumsy, yet they managed to survive without falling apart. Impressive. Her internal commentary was sharp, sardonic, and tinged with that quietly biting humor only someone truly alien could muster. She twitched a finger, or what passed for a finger on her delicate, fur-covered paw, pointing subtly at a passing couple. See that? She murmured to herself, tail flicking. Obsessed with each other's trivialities. They call this bonding. Primitive bonding, yes, but bonding nonetheless. How curious! She could not help but exaggerate their gestures in her mind, mentally enlarging the ridiculousness of spilled drinks, misdirected laughter, and awkward hugs. Each human movement became a spectacle, a dance of incompetence that made her fur bristle with amused incredulity. Her stomach grumbled softly, a reminder that she had not eaten properly since arrival. She glanced at a vending unit designed to cater to human nutrition, with its glowing selections of synthetic food bars. She had no idea how to operate it. After a series of confused paw gestures and tentative nudges with her nose, she gave up and muttered, "Humans call this convenience. I call it torment." The word tormented slipped from her tongue with a lilt of playful exaggeration, as if mocking herself for her own helplessness. The Vulpine had learned quickly that patience was a human virtue she was not expected to possess. Efficiency here was a form of subtle cruelty. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a group of engineers, a human male with an oversized utility belt, a female adjusting a hollow interface, and another crouched beside a small metallic device she couldn't identify. They were working on a small machine that blinked and hummed in a way that intrigued her. Curiosity prickled her fur. She stepped closer, careful to maintain a respectable distance, observing the device with the intensity of a scholar and the caution of someone who had already been misunderstood more times than she cared to count. "They handle this thing," she murmured, "as if it can manage feelings. Curious notion. Perhaps even foolish. But amusing." Her ears twitched. There was something different about this moment, a subtle shift in the air around the machine. A faint hum traveled along her neural implants, a lingering residual signal she had not anticipated. Her tail flicked sharply, ears forward, eyes widening in cautious interest. The humans did not notice her. They never did. Their focus was absolute, their attention to detail so precise that they missed the most obvious of presences, her, a golden-furred vulpine with expressive eyes that could communicate volumes if only anyone were capable of understanding. The vulpine leaned slightly closer, noses twitching, smelling the faint ozone of the device's energy field. "They are obsessed with touching things to make feelings happen," she whispered, the statement carrying a double meaning she found amusing. They touched the machine, yet perhaps they also touched her, indirectly. Her own circuits tingled, a reaction she could neither fully explain nor resist. It was a sensation not of fear, but of intrigue, a delicate prickle of anticipation that made her feel watched, considered, yet entirely safe. Nearby, a human engineer shifted position and sat down on a bench just a few feet from her, apparently oblivious to her presence. The hum of the machine flickered again, brushing past her neural resonances like a gentle breeze. She froze, ears perked, eyes widening. Something was happening, something subtle and unexpected. The human shifted slightly, unknowingly activating her latent emotional resonance chip. A warmth flooded her body, subtle at first, then stronger, tugging at her very sense of self in ways she had never experienced. Her tails curled tightly, then relaxed in a series of quick, spasmodic flicks that betrayed both confusion and delight. Her mind raced, analyzing the sensations. They were like attention, validation, pampering, all compressed into a single, dizzying wave. She had not realized how deprived she had been, how isolated, how starved for something as simple as acknowledgement. The humans were unaware, of course, of the minor chaos they had unleashed in a small alien body. She shifted slightly, trying to regain composure, but the internal commentary continued, sharp, witty, and tinged with risque humor. Handled like this, like royalty, though royalty rarely experiences such absurd, unintentional indulgence, she muttered under her breath, a smirk curling the corners of her muzzle. Nearby, the humans continued their work, oblivious to the full impact of their presence. They were so efficient, so precise, so technically superior, and yet so completely unaware of the emotional symphony they had unwittingly composed around her. She watched, amused, frustrated, and secretly delighted, marveling at the contradictions of human nature, strong, capable, brilliant, and yet capable of such accidental intimacy, such inadvertent attention, that a lonely Vulpine could feel like a princess without a word spoken directly to her. Her tail flicked once more, faster this time, a rhythm she could not entirely control. A shiver ran along her spine as the warmth deepened, the sensation sharpening. She closed her eyes, letting herself indulge in the absurdity and delight of being noticed, even indirectly. It was a heady, ridiculous sensation, and she could not help but whisper with a mixture of awe and sarcasm. Handled like a princess, though I dare say the crown would be slightly too tight for comfort. And so she sat there, observing, feeling, calculating, and enjoying the chaotic pleasure of an unintentional human touch, the start of something unexpected, mischievous, and deliciously comedic. The loneliness, for now, receded into the background, replaced by the curious, chaotic spark of life she had never anticipated finding on a planet so unfamiliar, yet so full of surprising potential. The Vulpine felt the warmth spreading through her, an unfamiliar sensation that made her twitch involuntarily. Her ears flicked, tails curling and uncurling, and she tried to disguise the thrill that coursed through her neural resonances. The human sitting nearby shifted again, oblivious to the subtle chaos his presence had caused. He adjusted the device he was working on, hands brushing over the controls with practiced precision, unaware that each motion sent a ripple of exhilaration through her body. She tilted her head, one golden ear twitching as she observed him. Humans were strange creatures, so competent, so confident, yet utterly unaware of the effects they had on others. She had always believed her own species understood nuance, subtlety, and the dance of attention, but here, on this human colony, she realized she had been catastrophically mistaken. These humans wielded a power more potent than their tools, the ability to affect feelings without intention, to touch without touching, to excite without knowing. Her tail flicked sharply, brushing against her own leg, and she muttered under her breath, "Handled like this, it's almost scandalous." She smirked at her own thought, the humor of it mingling with a flicker of delight. She had long ago learned that being alone could make one cynical, even sharp-tongued, yet the subtle attentions from this human rendered her temporarily speechless. She shifted slightly, trying to appear casual, but the human's presence had already set a rhythm in her body, a pulse she could not fully suppress. The human glanced at her briefly, just enough to notice her tail flick, then returned to his work. Unbeknownst to him, his casual gesture, a brush of his sleeve across the console, was interpreted by her neural implant as a deliberate caress. A ripple of warmth ran along her spine, and her ears flattened in a mixture of surprise and amusement. "Really, now," she muttered, voice low and musical. "Do all humans handle each other this clumsily, or is it just me?" The double meaning lingered in her tone, playful, teasing, and slightly risque. Curiosity overtook caution. She leaned a little closer, just enough to feel the hum of energy from the device. It was subtle, a vibration in the air that seemed to resonate with her very thoughts. Her tails twitched involuntarily, a sign she could not hide, and she let out a small, unintentional laugh. The sound was low and melodic, carrying both amusement and an edge of flirtation. The human looked up momentarily, catching the sound, but attributed it to the hum of the machinery rather than her reaction. She smirked. Humans, she thought, were always clever but never quite perceptive enough to notice the full picture. A small spark from the device flickered across her peripheral vision, and she felt it as a gentle tingle running down her arm. Her tails wrapped tightly around themselves, quivering in response. She bit the inside of her cheek to suppress a gasp. "Handled like this, like royalty, though I dare say the crown is invisible," she whispered, the words dripping with amusement and a teasing double entendre. Every subtle contact, every ripple of energy, seemed magnified in her heightened alien senses, making the mundane gestures of the human feel like a lavish indulgence. He shifted his position again, leaning forward slightly to examine a panel. The motion was casual, practical, entirely innocent, yet for her, it carried 1,000 implications. Her body reacted instinctively, a twitch of ears, a curling of tails, a shiver that traveled along her spine. "Do they know what they do to us?" she mused internally, half exasperated, half delighted. "No, of course not. Humans are far too clever to be aware of their own incompetence at emotional subtlety." The statement was both a critique and an admiring acknowledgement of their surprising power. The Vulpine tried to focus her mind, to observe rather than react, but the sensations refused to be ignored. Every minor motion, every casual gesture, was amplified through her resonance chip, creating a symphony of pleasure and hilarity she could neither predict nor control. Her internal monologue danced between sarcasm and wonder, teasing herself for being so easily affected, mocking the human for being completely oblivious, and laughing at the ridiculousness of the situation. She shifted her weight, attempting to regain composure, and muttered, "Handled like this, one might think I was being pampered for some grand ceremony." The words were carefully playful, a nod to her own amusement and the unintentional flattery provided by the human's mere presence. She imagined a crown of light settling on her head, invisible but somehow heavy with meaning, and the thought made her chuckle quietly. Her tail flicked sharply, ears twitching, a sign that her amusement and delight were more than casual. As she continued to watch, the human's attention moved seamlessly between the device and its controls, adjusting, fine-tuning, and testing. Each precise motion sent another subtle pulse through her neural resonance chip, creating waves of sensation that she tried to ignore, yet secretly relished. Her tails flicked, ears twitched, and she allowed herself a small, mischievous grin. "Handled like a princess, indeed, though the etiquette is entirely my invention," she whispered, the words dripping with humor, tease, and adult undertones. Despite her internal chaos, she remained composed externally. She adjusted her posture, sitting tall, projecting an air of dignity that contrasted sharply with the sensations coursing through her. The humans, as expected, noticed nothing beyond the hum of the machinery and the occasional clatter of tools. She found this predictably amusing, the contrast between her heightened, chaotic internal experience and the human's calm, unaware competence forming the core of her private humor. A sudden spark from the device flickered again, brushing against her paw. Her ears twitched, tails coiled tighter, and she let out a soft, almost musical sigh. "Handled like royalty, though I dare say my throne is far too small for such extravagant attention," she mused internally, the words carrying a teasing, double-meaning weight. Each gesture, each pulse of energy, was a gift she did not ask for but could not resist. Her amusement, pleasure, and slight embarrassment interwove into a rich, comedic tapestry of sensation that left her both exasperated and delighted. The human shifted again, this time adjusting a lever that inadvertently sent a pulse across the machine. Her tails wrapped around themselves in a complex coil, ears flattened, and a low chuckle escaped her throat. The effect was immediate, electric, and entirely beyond the engineer's awareness. She felt simultaneously pampered, teased, and completely at the mercy of the human's unintentional attentions. The Vulpine leaned back slightly, letting herself indulge in the absurdity of the moment, aware that no human could truly understand the effect they had created, yet secretly enjoying it all the same. Her mind raced with sarcastic commentary, teasing herself and the humans, analyzing every twitch and pulse. Handled like a princess, indeed. And yet, entirely unaware of the chaos you unleash, she whispered, the words playful, risque, and humor-laden. The combination of human competence, obliviousness, and unintentional emotional mastery was bewildering, intoxicating, and deeply amusing. Her tails flicked once more, ears twitched, and she allowed herself a satisfied smirk. For the first time since arriving on the colony, the Vulpine felt a flicker of connection, a subtle acknowledgement from a human who had no idea he was providing it. The warmth, the teasing, the accidental pampering, it was enough to make her purr internally, her pride, amusement, and pleasure intertwining. She leaned slightly closer, just enough to feel the continued ripple of energy, and whispered to herself, "Handled like royalty, though the crown is invisible, the pleasure is very real." The Vulpine could feel it, the subtle shift in attention, the invisible weight of consideration that seemed to press upon her in the most deliciously absurd way. The human had moved closer without intention, adjusting her seating, straightening a stray piece of equipment that brushed her paw. Each minor gesture felt amplified, exaggerated through her heightened senses, until it became a full-blown ceremonial act of pampering. Her tails twitched with the involuntary rhythm of someone being excessively indulged, and she allowed herself a small, mischievous grin. "Handled like a princess, though I suspect the royal protocols are entirely improvised," she muttered to herself. The warmth coursing through her neural chip intensified as the human absent-mindedly adjusted a console knob near her paw. The tiniest spark of contact, purely technological and entirely innocent, sent a ripple of sensations that she interpreted as personal attention. Her ears flattened slightly, then perked again, betraying a mixture of surprise and delight. Every movement, every accidental touch, became a form of luxurious indulgence in her mind. She couldn't help but exaggerate her reactions internally, tails curling and uncurling in ways she had never permitted herself before. A snack dropped from the human's pocket, some synthetic fruit bar he had been testing, and landed near her paw. She batted it delicately toward herself, but in her internal narration, it became a ceremonial offering, a royal tribute. "Handled like royalty even in crumbs," she whispered with a low, amused chuckle. The subtle adult double entendre of receiving attention, handling delicacies, and being cared for in such a mundane yet intimate way was not lost on her. Humans were oblivious, yet somehow perfect in their unintentional mastery of emotional stimulation. The engineer adjusted a chair near her, ostensibly for convenience, but in her mind it became a throne crafted just for her. She perched herself with exaggerated grace, tails coiling delicately around the base of her seat. The ordinary human action of leveling a chair suddenly took on a dramatic, ceremonial weight. She leaned back slightly, ears twitching, eyes half closed in mock dignity. "Handled like a princess," she murmured with a sly smirk. "Though the scepter is missing, and I suspect I would do a far better job wielding it." The humor, teasing, and subtle risque undertones were perfectly balanced, her internal commentary both playful and sharp. The human glanced at her momentarily, offering a nod that he believed was purely polite. She felt it as a personal acknowledgement of her royal status, a deliberate gesture of approval. The Vulpine's tails flicked involuntarily, her ears flattened and twitched simultaneously, and she allowed herself a quiet, delighted hum. "Handled with such precision," she whispered internally, "and entirely unaware. It is almost insulting how perfect they are at this." Her amusement was tinged with affection, her teasing wit flourishing even as her body responded to sensations she could neither ignore nor fully control. She leaned slightly closer to the console, pretending to inspect it with casual curiosity, though every movement allowed her to feel the subtle pulses of energy that the human's work emitted. Each minor adjustment of a dial or flick of a switch was magnified in her perception into a luxurious act of attention. Her internal monologue wove humor, sarcasm, and flirtation into every observation. Handled like royalty, though I wonder if they understand the full extent of my appreciation. The double meaning lay in her words and in the sensations she interpreted as personal indulgence, teasingly ambiguous yet entirely adult in undertone. The Vulpine allowed herself a small stretch, tail curling elegantly, and imagined herself draped in ceremonial robes of light and energy. Each minor human gesture, adjusting a chair, nudging a lever, leaning casually, was transformed in her mind into acts of elaborate pampering. She chatted softly to herself, a mixture of amusement, critique, and enjoyment. Handled with such care, yet completely unaware of the effect, marvelous, she mused, letting her amusement ripple through her posture, ears, and tails. The comedy of exaggeration, the HY contrast, and the playful adult undertones blended seamlessly. A soft spark from the device brushed against her paw, and she yelped quietly, trying to suppress the involuntary reaction. The human glanced in her direction, misinterpreting it as surprise at the machine's spark. She smirked, internally reveling in the dramatic misinterpretation. Handled like royalty, startled by the smallest touch, quite fitting, she whispered. The moment was both embarrassing and exhilarating, a perfect blend of humor and subtle sensuality, heightened by the Vulpine's alien perception of human competence and obliviousness. She noticed that the human had straightened a panel near her, his hands brushing against the edge of her seat. In her perception, it became a deliberate act of service, an intentional acknowledgement of her presence and importance. She let out a quiet, amused sigh, letting the sensation wash over her. Handled like a princess, though the attention is entirely accidental, the effect is deliciously real, she mused. Her tails curled in delight, ears flicking in rhythm, and she leaned slightly forward, pretending to observe the device while secretly savoring every nuanced ripple of attention. The Vulpine's internal monologue grew bolder, teasing herself and the humans simultaneously. Handled like royalty, yet entirely unaware. Oh, what a deliciously absurd combination! How mundane their gestures, yet how lavish the effect! She allowed herself a small, mischievous grin, enjoying the play between the human's practical efficiency and her own dramatic interpretation. Every minor adjustment, every casual glance, every accidental spark of energy was magnified, transformed, and relished. As the human worked, adjusting and calibrating with precise competence, she felt a deepening warmth, a sense of playful indulgence, and a rush of exhilaration that mingled with her amusement. The mundane had become ceremonial, the casual had become luxurious, and she reveled in the absurdity. Handled like a princess, she whispered again, softer this time. Though the court is invisible, the indulgence is undeniable. Her ears twitched, tails coiled, and she allowed herself a quiet hum of satisfaction, utterly delighted by the accidental pampering, the teasing double entendre, and the HFY contrast between human mastery and emotional obliviousness.